Hello and welcome. What are we cooking up today in the Teaching Test Kitchen? I want to talk about Google Notebook LM. Have you tried this awesome tool? You can tell by my disposition that I am a fan and I am in favor of this, but I've only just started to play around, and so has my friend and colleague, Mark Dust. What's up, Mark? High five across the country from all the way from Pennsylvania to California.
Left coast or right coast?
There we go. You've also just started experimenting with Google Notebook LM. First
Thank
impression, just
you.
off the top of your head, what do you think?
Well, honestly, the very first time I opened it up, I was like, what in the world is this? I kind of had a hard time wrapping my head around how do I use this? How do I play with it? So I did what everybody else does. I went to the YouTubes
Of
and said,
course.
okay, I want to watch a couple of videos of this and get some ideas of how it works and how I could make a use case for it in my scenario. And I came out on the other side going, all right, I love Chat GPT, but I might love this just a little bit more.
Oh, interesting. Interesting. So even more than ChatGPT. To me, I just find that they are different. So before we
Mhm.
launch into talking about it, obviously when people need to go to it, you would just need to go to the website. It's notebooklm.google, but obviously you just do a quick search and it'd be very easy to find. If you use a profile from your university, like in my case, sometimes they're restricted. Like you can see mine is saying here, sorry, you do not have access to Google Notebook LM. So in order to circumvent that, what do I have to do? Actually have to go to Google Notebook LM from my personal Chrome profile. So if you have any issues, just wanted to forewarn you about that. But as you can see, I've only just started. I only have 5 notebooks in here. So it's called Google Notebook LM because you organize things into notebooks. But I would say, big picture, Google Notebook LM is a place for you to bring in lots of different sources and lots of different media types of sources to synthesize that data and then get an output. You do something with it. So you can combine PDFs, websites, documents,
Google Slides,
Google
YouTube
Slides,
videos.
audio source. Like you can bring in so many different types of information in here. So I started this back in November, so it's only been a few months, and I uploaded 2 sources into this: Explaining the Internet to Grandma YouTube video and a document PDF, a comprehensive compilation of history's greatest analogies, metaphors, and similes. So it's an overview of a book. I never metaphor I didn't like. So I've got these 2 sources, this book on analogies, similes, and metaphors. Now you can add in a lot more sources, but these are the only 2 sources that I have in here. And you can see this is a video from one of my favorite public speaking people, Vin Jian, and he's explaining the internet to grandma on here. So so this is the chat part. This is where you interact with Google Notebook LM. Then over here is the studio part and your notes. So it's got some built-in templates. And as you can see, I really am just figuring this out. I'm not 100% sure where the layout of everything is, but it created one document for me, giving me a brief summary of the key themes and ideas from the provided sources. So in your studio, it gives you some templates. Like you can just click on ask for a briefing doc or ask for a timeline or ask for an FAQ document or a study guide. But you can also add other things here. So you can I don't actually know what this would do. Do you have any idea, Mark? Adding a note? Is this where I would add
Yeah.
my own notes?
You can add your own notes there. You can also go into the chat window in the middle there and pick out something that interests you that you want to highlight, and you just highlight that, and then you can create a new note from it as well. And
Ah,
so that's one of the reasons why I said I might like this a little bit more than Chat GPT, because you can combine so many different sources. And then within the chat window, you can go and pick at those sources and ask it questions. And so I'm excited to use it for like literature reviews for my research and trying to find, what gaps might exist in the current literature. Then I can take that information, go over, I can do a timeline, and it'll show me, like you have those seminal papers that always, set the field. And then you can kind of work through and say, okay, what's the oldest reference to the newest reference? How do they fit together? And so you can use that with a brief and give you a bit of an overview with that as well, the study guide and the FAQs. You can use those to help pull what it thinks is the most important pieces of information in order to double check and say, yeah, I like that or I don't like that. And then the other thing I like about the sources as well is in the middle there, when you run the analysis, you can go in and it'll do like a little circle with a number in it, and you can click on each one and it'll show you the source that it used that you
Right.
uploaded. And then you can also use, so you can double check it. Because one of my biggest fears is, and I've ran into this in the past with ChatGPT, is hallucinations.
Mhm.
It made up some articles that I spent way too much time going and looking for that didn't exist, but boy, they sure sounded like they were a good article for me to include in my research and in the literature review. And so now I can go in and start looking in that chat and say, okay, yeah, this is a key point. I'm going to highlight that and make it a note. And then I can look at all of those notes over there to start to really bring my thoughts together. And that's one of the things I really like about it, is I think it'll help me to get through large sources of information in many different formats very quickly.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's actually something I used it for recently, where this week I delivered a talk on the science of memorability and engagement. And I love Carmen Simon's work and the book Make It Stick and all these other different sources. So you can see in this notebook, memorability, I pulled in 13 sources. I I was thinking that I have noticed that I prefer fewer sources because otherwise the information becomes a bit diluted because it's just handling so much, but it can handle a lot. I don't even know if there is a limit.
The free version will do 50.
Okay, good to know. So we can pull up to 50 sources of information, which man, that's a lot. But there could be reasons why you would need that much data, right?
So write in a journal article.
Absolutely. There you go.
Yeah.
So I pulled in, mostly these were all PDF documents. It doesn't have to be all PDFs, but in this case I pulled in a lot of PDF books and documents and things to give me some ideas. And then these are the outputs that I received from it, which I just really find interesting. And like you were saying, when you're in this middle chat section, it gives you some prompt ideas too. So if you have a hard time thinking what to ask, it gives you ideas of what you can say. So if I wanted to ask this question, how do brain functions such as attention, memory, and emotion impact information memorability across diverse contexts? I can't quite see the full question all the way through on the bottom, but it gives you ideas. The cool thing about this is, let me go back to a note. I had my friend Eden Liu come and talk to my one of my classes. She works for a company called Reincubate, and they make a tool called Camo, which is a virtual camera. They have a free version and a pro version that's paid. She came and talked to the class, and she also shared about brand voice. So I pulled in the recording of our conversation with the class, also additional PDF documents about branding and style. And then this audio overview section, I would say this is probably what Google NotebookLM is most famous for at the moment, is creating podcasts that sound very realistic. There are two voices, a male and a female voice, that come into this, and you can't change that at the moment that I know of. But basically, I'm gonna play this so you can hear a little bit of this. A 25-minute podcast it came up with from the 4 sources that I inputted. So let's listen to the beginning.
Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive. Today we're going to take a look at how a real company built its brand voice. And this is going to be super helpful for all of you, especially those of you thinking about going into HR, because you'll see how a company's voice can have a big impact on everything from marketing to internal communications.
Yeah, you know how we've been talking about like having a consistent brand voice?
Right.
Well, today's case study is all about Reincubate. It's a tech company that helps businesses build their brand, and they've actually created an ebook called How to Build Your Brand, along with a style guide template.
And we're really lucky because we have this conversation between Tatiana, your professor, and Eden, who's the head of content at Reincubate.
Now, interesting. First of all, it's just so interesting to hear a podcast like about yourself. You're being mentioned in this by these AI voices. They did make some mistakes. The brand document is not from Reincubate, so you still have to pay attention because it did kind of make that up. I didn't identify Reincubate as the source of that document, but it did get our names right. It did remember that I'm the professor of the class and that Eden is a guest in my class. You can specify who you want the audience to be in this podcast. So I find that really interesting. And then you can download the audio podcast. They also have this interactive mode that's currently in beta. So I have to allow permission for use of my mic. But as they're going through and talking in their podcast, you can actually, let's see, we'll play the audio, right?
Hey everyone, welcome to our deep dive today.
Oh, hey,
Click on
welcome.
join.
What's up?
Hi there. I just wanted to ask a quick question for Eden.
Hi there, thanks for tuning in and asking.
We love hearing from you. What's your question?
Okay, let's unpack this. You're curious about something Eden said.
Absolutely. Jump right in with your question.
Let's see, Eden was just starting to talk about their brand voice document.
That's right. It dictates a lot about how they communicate.
So fire away with your question, we're all ears.
We can definitely weave your question into our discussion.
So what were you wondering about regarding Eden's comments?
So it is interesting, right? You can now interact with the podcast as if you were a live audience member. So that I think is pretty interesting.
Yeah, me too. I did a little quick thing with mine doing a nutrition presentation that my students had given to them by our health and wellness folks. And they came up with a 16-minute.
Let me pull up. I'll pull that up for us so we can see it.
There we go.
Okay, so you guys have sent in some really interesting stuff today. It seems like there's this theme of like food and what we should and shouldn't be doing with our bodies going on here.
Yeah.
Very
I'm
cool.
going to hop in here and see if I can ask some questions. They kept like prompting you to answer or ask a question. I was kind of wondering where it gives you time to actually stop and talk. But the other thing I think would be interesting about this is by feeding it, particularly like if I wanted to review my Zoom lectures and try to figure out, am I making sense to the students in my lectures? I can, if I use like the script, or even if I published it unlisted to YouTube and do the transcription, I can then import that and have it as a source. And then I can have the podcast basically tell me what I said. And if it makes sense, then I'm like, okay, that's probably a pretty good lecture. If it's not seeming to generate what I thought I was communicating, then that's a cue to me to say, you know what, maybe I need to review this and rewrite my lectures and change the information or something along those lines. So it's taking a little bit too long over here. I'm not sure if that's a internet issue on my side or what it is.
But Mark, let me ask you something. Do you happen to know what the LM in Google NotebookLM stands for?
Language model?
You got it. Oh my gosh, that's
Oh.
amazing. As a matter of fact, that deserves a bell. Nicely done. Nicely done. Good job. Google Notebook Language Model. Kind of a long name to say Google Notebook LM. But anyway, that's what it's called. And I like your suggestion, the way that you're using it with class content. I think it can be really helpful planning our semesters too. If we input our own syllabi, articles, announcements, messages, maybe even topic outlines or anything related to our class, we could enter all of those things as sources and then use it to prepare future content or even to brainstorm ideas when we're stuck or we need to switch things up. So I think planning is a great way to use it. I also think for creating class materials would be another great way. Have you thought about ways you could use it to create class materials?
Yeah, I'm actually in the middle of creating 2 new public health administration courses for our master's in public health program that we revamped last summer. And so I have a lot of readings, articles and things for students to read every week. And I need to create course materials and slides and lectures and things of that nature. And so I plan on moving all the stuff that I want as a resource into Notebook LM and having it kind of process all of that and give me like a quick briefing of what everything is about. And then I can do an FAQ and it will go in and say, okay, here's probably what the most common questions are going to be. And so that I can start to build content around what students are probably going to have questions about. and play with that a little bit and see if I can start making some slides from that information and
Yes,
figure it out.
slides is
Yeah,
good.
yep.
I also think we could make quiz questions from it or discussion questions. So I really think that this can be super helpful for education. I find it very education friendly, actually. That's what I
Uh,
like about
Have you hit
Google
the study
Notebook.
guide button yet?
I hit it today with you with when let's see which notebook was I on? Was it the one on analogy, similes, and metaphors? Yes. So let me share, and I haven't looked at it. So let's see. All right. So I hit it over here. I think the study guide was the first one here. Yeah, study guide, and then all right, it goes into the text presents Peter's analogy. The murals in the restaurant are on par with the food. Explain the humor in this analogy in the context of the likely quality of both restaurant murals and museum food. And then it gives you the answers as well. So it gave me 10 questions and 10 answers. And then there's also essay format questions and a glossary of key terms. Oh, look at that. I didn't even think. Look at that. It gives us key terminology as well. So this would be helpful in my public speaking lesson when we're talking about figurative language or wordplay or ways that we can, the ways that the diction we use is going to impact our speeches. So I think that's pretty cool. So that's just the study guide itself. So let me go back to Studio. And then this was the FAQ, frequently asked questions about metaphors and analogies. What is the fundamental role of a metaphor? Why are cliches considered detrimental to the use of similes? Yeah, this is pretty neat. And again, this is with just two sources as well. So fascinating.
Yeah, so how do you plan to use it with students? Are you going to introduce it to students?
I do want to introduce it, and I already did. I actually mentioned it in my class because I think that this is, if I was a student, well, actually, I'm a student of life, of course, but if I needed to study, I think that this would be a great study tool to help us study smarter because I feel like it's going to create flashcards. We saw that it can create study guides, FAQs, which obviously, but make flashcards and practice guides. Doing it this way makes using AI ethical because you're inputting sources, you're processing the information with it rather than asking it to do something for you. To me, that's a different dynamic than when you just when I mean, you and I are also big fans of ChatGPT and we use it frequently in many areas of our lives. But this one feels different. It is more like a processing information together to help me learn. That's what it is. Google
Right.
Notebook LM to me is about helping us learn information rather than giving us results to do something.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Right. You were asking me earlier how I describe it. I came up with the idea that it supercharges my learning because
Yeah, that's good.
I can take all these different sources that I would have spent hours and hours, like even watching YouTube videos, hours and hours and hours watching these things, trying to gather all the possible information I can get in order to be most well informed from multiple sources. I can put it into here and then start having a conversation in the middle, asking questions. And it's going to go and find those answers for me without me having to spend hours
Yes.
on YouTube or hours reading other journal articles and things of that nature. I think it's going to help me synthesize the information, like you said earlier, in a much higher level form, and
Absolutely.
then I can do something with that. I can put it out as an FAQ, and then maybe I decide to write a blog post about it or something based on those insights that I found that I may not get just because of the mental fatigue of reading all this stuff or watching all the videos. And so I think it's going to help me to do what humans do best and pull out those nuggets
Mhm.
that really and use that information to produce some kind of other information that people can use or my students can have access to and improve my teaching. What I'm most interested with, I think, is taking these resources and pulling information out to create new stuff and then going back into Chat GPT with it to expand on it. Or starting in Chat GPT with an outline of here's the things that I want to talk about. Now I'm gonna go out and find resources, put it into Notebook LM and pull out specific pieces of information that I can then add back into my outline create a lecture from. So I kind of I see them working hand in hand because they're two different tools.
Yeah, and on my end, I think I had like 20 different thoughts fire at the same time. I feel like when you're exploring with this, it's very focused because with other AI tools, like it's picking from all over the place. Here, it's like
Mhm.
use these sources, and that one example that I showed where I used 13 sources, if I don't want it to reference one of those, I just uncheck them in that prompt when I'm chatting in that section, and it won't take those into consideration. So I think there's a bit more focus and control. It's almost like driving an automatic versus driving a stick shift. Like there's just a little more control and more focus in that. So I can appreciate that, especially when you're learning. I don't necessarily need everything on the planet. Focus on these things. And then from that, you can prompt it to, and I know we can prompt ChatGPT with this as well, but explain this like you would to a 5-year-old or a 10-year-old, or help me create a mnemonic device, or summarize this in 180 characters, or you can give all these different specific prompts. But I like the idea that you can say, focusing on these sources only, give me this. I need to play around with it more, to be honest with you. But when it comes to synthesizing information, this is the place that I go to. And I'm also exploring, how might I be able to use this in my personal life? I was actually watching a video, somebody who I like online named, what is it, Jeff Sue? Let me see, what is his name? Let me see. He created a video on Google NotebookLM, and the example, Jeff Sue, SU, he talks a lot about tech and AI stuff, and I like his style. It's very good. So I will recommend him. But the example he was sharing was putting in blood work and information on test results. So he was using it for his own health. So I was like, oh, that's interesting, and entering your own information. I mean, I feel like all AI tools will work in many different ways, but I really like Google Notebook LM for synthesizing information, for learning, for processing. What did you say? Supercharge your learning? I like that.
Yep. Supercharge my learning.
This is really cool. This is really cool. Have you tried any prompts that have been particularly helpful?
I have not really played with the prompts that much inside of it. But I know, some of them you can do like, give me a 1 sentence synopsis of these resources, or give me, 5 bullet points of the top, whatever. I imagine it's going to be kind of the same as like if you're going into Chat GPT and say, okay, hey, synthesize this journal article, and say, okay, what's the number one takeaway from this, or something along those lines. So I really don't know how it plays with the sources that you give it. That's something I'll have to kind of test and see. Oh, you can also add web pages to it as well. That's
Yep.
another source.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, it does use web links. So let's just come over here and have a peek at this.
Can you start a new notebook and we can kind of show what that interface looks like?
Great
Beginning.
idea, Mark. So let's go to create new. And even on here, you can choose the way you want this to look. If you want it to be the little icons, or if you want it to be in a more of a list format. So it's totally up to you. For me, I'm comfortable with this for now. And let's create a new one. So we would need to upload sources, and it can be a PDF, it can be a text file, it can be an MP3 file. So it will allow you to also upload Google Drive content, Google Docs, and Google Slides, a website link, a YouTube video, or you can paste text. So these would be, and here's the source limit, Mark, that you mentioned earlier, up to 50 sources.
Yeah,
So
that's so cool that you can put all these different formats together as sources and reference all of them at the same time.
hey, actually, let me see. What if we put a past episode of the Teaching Test Kitchen on here? Let's see, what's the last thing we talked about together? We talked about
AI policies.
the AI policy. Okay, so let me bring in the audio from that. So I'm just going to show you my screen so you can see what I'm doing here. I've got the video, the MP4 video. I think this is the finished one. Yes, this is the finished one. And I also have the transcript of it. So let me just drag in the MP4 file, see if it will. Oh, each file needs to be under 200 megabytes. Okay. So we
Well, that's an
are,
important limitation.
all right, good to know. I could bring in the YouTube website link to the video, but since I have the transcript, let me just grab the transcript. Welcome to my files, everybody. And let's see, AI policy, and we'll go with our, all right, so our first source here is the transcript of that conversation. We could, well, you know what, let's just see from one source, have it generate a podcast about our video podcast and see how now this does sometimes take some time to create, and it gives you this message, no need to stick around, so you can click off of this. But in the meantime, we could, I wonder if it will, if I create a briefing doc. Good. I just was wondering if I do something else, if it stops the audio processing, but it doesn't. So that stays. And let's see, our briefing doc, based on the content, the main themes, the urgency and necessity of AI policies. AI is a tool, not a replacement. Importance of AI literacy, open dialogue, and student buy-in, key components of an AI policy. This is, of course, your key components because yours had lots of good key components. Encouraging responsible and ethical use, AI literacy, accountability, and citation rationale. Okay, this is pretty good. It's come up with a substantive document on our conversation, and even has, oh, check this out, quotes highlighting key ideas. I said, no, well, what are you waiting for? We all need to get this done. Let me see, Mark. Understanding these limitations is crucial. Another one from you, Mark. You have to make sure students understand that it's still not okay to copy word for word. And then you also said consequences may include grades. Okay, so you're talking about the different things. And then it gives us a little conclusion. So it's quite a thorough write-up on our conversation. So I really can see how this helps.
So let's ask it a
time.
question in the chat in there.
Okay. All right, so we're here in the chat. What should we say?
Give me a one-sentence synopsis.
You got to remember that I can spell, just not type. So give me a one-sentence synopsis.
Yeah, of this resource, or I'm not sure how to talk to it yet.
Of this resource.
I guess we must ask, please.
Okay. This resource features a conversation between Tatiana and Mark Dust, two educators who discuss the importance of creating and implementing an AI policy in course syllabi to guide students on the responsible and ethical use of AI as a learning tool. Here's the little citations we can look at. Number one, from the text. Okay, so that is helpful, that does point us to the source of the information. And look, it came up with the 17-minute.
Podcast is ready. Was our video 17 minutes?
The video itself definitely was. So let's see. Let's go to interactive mode and let's click play.
All right, so today we're diving into something I'm sure a lot of you are thinking about, especially if you're like involved in education at all or just trying to figure out what to make of all this AI stuff.
Yeah.
It seems like you can't go a day without hearing about it. So we're going to try to break down how to create an AI policy specifically for a course syllabus.
Right.
Feels like a really timely topic, right?
Yeah, it's moving so fast, trying to keep up with all the developments is
It feels like a moving target almost.
totally.
To help us wrap our heads around all of this, we've been looking at a conversation between these two educators, Tatiana and Mark. And they're actually going through this right now. So they're sharing what they're thinking about, how they're approaching it, even like specific wording they're putting in their syllabi.
That's cool.
So our goal today is like for you listening, we want to pull out those really practical insights from what they're talking about and give you a sense of,
I'm going to click the
hey
join.
there, how can we help?
Hi. I was wondering, can you condense down the key points Mark shared in one sentence that I can use as a big overview, as a headline to share on social media?
Oh, that's a great idea. Let's see.
Okay, let's unpack this. Mark's main message seemed to be
That educators should craft AI policies emphasizing responsible and ethical use to enhance student learning and future employability.
perfect. How's that for a headline?
Yeah, that hits the main points really well.
Whether you're actually designing a course or just thinking about how AI is going to impact your own learning. Like, what are the possibilities, but also what are some of the challenges? And I think it's worth saying right up front that, like Tatiana and Mark, a lot of us are just figuring this out as we go.
Totally.
It can feel a little overwhelming. So we're not trying to add to that. We want to give you some clear, practical ideas that you can adapt to your own needs, your own situation.
I really like hearing the way these two AI voices come up with the content and what they're going to say. It's some kind of a stimulus for my brain to hear, like, what are they going to say? How and the point that they say things quite natural. I mean, it's you almost forget that these are two AI voices.
If my students were to take my slides and the PDF and put it in here and then have it create a podcast over those slides and then they download them, if they could, listen to that on the way to class.
That's what I was thinking too.
Yeah.
I
But I just want to make sure it's accurate.
making audio content. I actually think that this would be a great assignment for students to explore with AI, interact with the class content, and then have debriefing conversations. How did they find did they find any inconsistencies? Did they find any errors? What things worked really well? Interacting with the podcast. So sharing their experience using this, and at the same time, they are then dealing with the content of the class by processing it with Google NotebookLM.
Yeah, that could be really interesting, helping to introduce the ethical use of AI into our courses.
In a way that has them processing class content, because they could be,
Right.
The prompts could be use 5 sources from class. And we will have shared whatever we would have shared, in my case, recordings or videos or links, handouts, additional resources mentioned in class, and they can add their own thing. So I really like Google NotebookLM. On my end, I think this is a great tool, and I'm excited to see how I can apply it both in my classroom, but also teach my students how to apply it. Because as I said, I think as a study tool, this would be my go-to as a student.
Yeah, definitely. And then that might help reduce some of the student dependency on instructors giving study guides. It's like, okay, look here, you have these tools, use them, create your own study guides, fill in those gaps that you don't have, or gaps in knowledge. Like you mentioned the Make It Stick book earlier. I took a little excerpt of that and I distribute that to my students and talks about how to study, spaced repetition, and don't read just to memorize type of thing. And so I think that can help them with creating different modalities of study with the podcast version of it, the FAQs version of it, the quiz thing that they put out, the briefing. So it's just depending upon how you want to or how you best absorb that information, I think is a key way that this can meet learners of different style preferences. I guess
Yes.
it's kind of a long way around. I'm trying to get to is like we can meet students where they're at and give them tools to help overcome some of those challenges. Maybe, English is a second language type of students. This might help them as well with interpreting information and being able to, learn language as well.
Yeah, I like it. I'm very excited for this. Thank you so much for your time today, Mark. I can't wait to see. We'll have to come back and do a future episode to see how we have implemented, knowing that right now it's like the beginning, but lately I've started to use it more and more. So happy experimenting to you too on that.
Yeah, thank you. Like I said, I didn't know about it until 2 weeks ago. So, thanks for introducing me. I appreciate it.
Pleasure on my end. So let's recap a little bit. This is not your grandmother's notebook. This is an amazing AI tool that's going to help you save some time, create good ideas, process, synthesize a lot of information, and you can even pass it on to your students or create assignments around it that will really encourage them to interact with the class content. So I invite you, if you're an educator, try this out. Share some of your favorite prompts or use cases or ways that it's been helpful to you. I'm sure you can come up with so many great ways to use this. So please remember to keep learning, inspiring, and teaching with love. Happy exploring. See you next time.